What's up, everybody? Welcome to CFP Talks. My name is Jonas, and with me is Mr. Raman Singh. Raman, what's going on, man?
Man, I slept bad
Uh-oh.
last night, so my neck is like just I can't even move my neck. I'm like a little robot.
Oh, that happens to me every time I fall asleep on the couch. I wake up like walking like to the left every time. Hmm.
It's like the worst feeling, man. It's like the worst feeling when you just can't like move your neck properly.
This is the and like you feel the tightness like up here in your trap and like
Yeah.
like God forbid if I have to turn my head while driving. It's all mirrors all day.
All mirrors all day. Oh man.
So let's dive into a little bit of CFP. And this is one thing I always tell my students, and I know you and I were chatting about this before we turned the camera on today, is the bar stool test. And to me, like this is the ultimate I understand something if it passes the bar stool test. I also call it the fifth grader test. But for those of you who don't know, the bar stool test is imagine you were at the bar with your friend and they asked you, they said, "Hey, I saw this on Forbes or I saw this on blah, blah, blah. What is a B trust? What is, how is an option taxed? And can you explain it to them verbally without fumbling, stumbling, and bumbling all over your words? And can you give a simple example of that to help them understand it? If you can do that, and you can do that with a very complex CFP topic, you probably understand it.
I absolutely agree with that. I mean, if we were to look at doctors, for example, right, Joe, when you look at a young doctor who just got out of med school, they're doing their residency or rotation, whatever, right? And you speak to them, they'll tend to use a lot of like technical knowledge because
Yeah.
that's what they learned, right? And you're just kind of like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, I have no clue what you're saying. And then when you meet like the experienced physician, right, who's been doing this for a minute, they'll just talk to you like something in a such a simplest form, and you still explain what the real problem is and how what's going on, but they explain it so well, like you said, like you're explaining it to a fifth grader, and
Yeah.
that is the key when you're mastering something.
Oh, when I first started practicing, that was my way of compensating for not really being comfortable in meetings. I would be like, we want to take advantage of global opportunities. And I would watch my mentor and my senior part, and they were so smooth. They would say it in the most common English. They would say things like, and it was just like, it was beautiful to watch. And for me, I faked it. I said what they said until I kind of figured out my own words. So I just repeated what they said, and I really didn't know what I was doing until I found my own words. But I had to stumble and bumble quite a bit to get there. And I feel like that's any profession. Like, you ever go to the gym and you're working with a trainer, or you're in a group, and they're like, "We really want you to activate your core." I'm like, "What is activating my core?" I'm like, "Please explain that." I'm like, "Squeeze your belly." I'm like, "You couldn't have just said that." Please tell me to just squeeze my belly or squeeze my butt or do tell me what you want, because activating my core, and okay, that might make sense to you with the technical jargon, but it doesn't make sense to me as somebody who doesn't know. And the deeper we get into this field, obviously the easier it is for us to just talk technically, right? Makes sense.
See,
But
I think you're right with like when you speak technical. Now going back to the exam study, if you're able to explain something in a technical manner, there's a possibility that you don't really understand it. You just memorized it. But the thing
mm,
is that you know it, the actual exam requires the application of that material. Like I'll give you an example. So I actually have two examples I'd like to share.
yeah.
But the first one happened recently with the student. I asked him, I was like, "What is a crummy trust?" Or help me understand what crummy is. And he gave me a really nice definition. I was like, but what does that mean?
Mm.
And you know what he said? The same thing again. I'm like, you're giving me like a technical definition, but the technical definition, it's great if the question is saying what is a crummy trust, what is a crummy power, and if literally the definition is written, and you're like, oh yeah, I memorized this definition. But if you cannot explain to your buddy what a crummy trust is or a crummy power is, there's a very high probability you're going to have struggle with what crummy is on the exam. I mean, that's just my opinion.
I don't think that's an opinion. I think that's a fact because, and I'll tell you why, because you hear this all the time. I don't even know what the question is asking me, or when the wording changes, I get myself turned inside out. And if you're the type of person that feels that way, that you're like, I thought I understood it until I started doing questions and they completely changed the wording. And then I'm like turned inside out, upside down. It's because you understand this frozen idea, not something that's dynamic and fluid, which is what the CFP is. It's a living, breathing organism. And a lot of the concepts that we do not have a single application. They have two, three, four, five applications that can be used in a lot of different ways. And that's part of what CFP wants us to know as professionals is that that single thing that we're teaching it actually works in a lot of different ways.
Right.
And so when we change the wording, it's not that we're trying to trick you, which a lot of people go in thinking, oh, they're trying to trick me, they're trying to make it difficult. No, we want to know if you actually understand the concept. And if you understand one frozen piece of that concept, like, then it's going to be very difficult for you to apply that or even explain it. And I love what you just said there because I ask people all the time, like, okay, tell me what you know about Sharpe ratio. Okay, it's the return of the portfolio minus the risk-free rate divided by standard deviation. Okay, what does it tell us? The return of the portfolio minus the risk-free rate divided by standard. Okay, that number that we get, what does it tell us? The return of the portfolio, and you're like, oh my God, right? And we're going, well, wait a second. Tell me if I was your buddy at a bar. How do we convey risk adjusted return, our technical jargon, and explain that Sharpe ratio in the easiest way possible? And again, if you can explain it to a fifth grader, you can explain it to a friend at a bar after two nice gin and tonics or a really cold martini. You probably know the material. But if you keep repeating the same thing over and over again, do you really get it?
That's a big thing, right? Like you said, the CFP exam, the CFP board first wants you to memorize. Absolutely, you gotta memorize. But then most importantly, you gotta be able to apply. And memorizing something versus application of that material is a whole different thing.
Right.
So memorize to understand, memorize to remember, but application will allow you to understand and apply. And the moment you can do that, then it's just it just takes things at a whole different level.
Mm.
I asked my student the other day, we were talking about ABC trusts, and and I was like, okay, like explain what a B trust is to me. And he goes, "Oh, it's a bypass trust." I'm like, "Okay, fair. What does it mean? What is it bypassing?" "Well, you use the marital deduction." I'm like, "Nope." Like, okay, obviously there's a missing gap. It's like, help me understand that. And it was just such a struggle with that student because he didn't have that memorized, and now when he's trying to explain something, it's just a big mumble jumble, right? And then I talked to him about, okay, well, explain C trust to me. And he said it's a Q-tip trust. I'm like, well, what does a Q-tip mean? What does it allow you to do? And he's like, oh, well, the beneficiary could receive crummies and this. I'm like, okay,
Mm.
don't mix words. And I'm sure you've seen it where students that they'll see these, like ABC trust or simple versus complex trusts. And then they start like, 2503 versus 2503B trust. They all sound similar, and then they start like just dumping all that together, and then that's why the memorization part will take you so far, because then you're gonna take like some part that you memorized from A trust and you're gonna slap that into C trust, or something you're gonna take from simple and add it into complex. It's kind of like, all right, like you just memorized just a bunch of data and
Mm.
you're mixing it all up. It's like speaking like me speaking like English and Punjabi together and trying to make something out of it. It's kind of like, no, it's not gonna work.
Yeah, and it's, I think there's two things going on here. I think one, I think a lot of CFP prep is rushed, right? And when I took CFP, I don't know when you took, were there those fast tracks available when you did it, like for the education?
I'm not really too sure. I mean, it was 10 years ago.
Right. Well, I'm not gonna even say how long ago mine was, just because now I'm gonna really feel it. But okay, back when I did it, and again, let's see, what does mine say? July 7th, 2008 is when I got my CFP certificate after I did all my work hours, but I took it in March of '08.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I started my education in the fall of '06.
Way to date yourself, man.
All right, for real, right? Jesus Christ, that's almost 20 years ago when I started my CFP education. But we didn't have many choices. And, now we have more choices, which is great because now it's more accessible. More people can do it. I feel like something gets a little bit lost in the education now where everybody's trying to do it so fast that it's like just clicking buttons. So you get good at associating, but not necessarily recalling. Where I know extensions of something if I see it, but if I don't see it, I don't really know it. And that becomes a really big problem because, like, if I see Q-tip, I can associate income to a spouse. So I know extensions of the concept, but I don't actually even know what a Q-tip really is.
Right.
I don't even know why the trust really exists. And a lot of times, what I'm doing with students, whether it be in our group sessions or our one on ones, is let's take it 2 or 3 steps back and learn why this exists to begin with. And a great example of this is dividend discount model, right? Where it's like, let's take it back and let's go back to when this model was first existed. 490 components of the S&P paid out dividends. Dividends were a very big part of investor return, so everything was valued on a dividend, and then we break it from there. If you're just memorizing D1 over R minus G, you're going to lose a lot,
Yep.
right?
Agreed.
And you're gonna go, I know that when I see X, I do Y. It's a really bad way to study because as a exam writer, like when I'm writing exams, I am going to take advantage of that you memorize something and you memorize one iteration of it. Because
Yeah.
I'm always going to change the details because I can't be sure that you even understand it if you can't speak about it simply or change when things are changing, right? And if you're getting frustrated with that on the exam, I get it. It sucks as an exam taker to sit there and have to know so many iterations, but as a practicing CFP, you should be very grateful to it because it's teaching you how to problem solve when things are changing and your client situations are changing, in the same way that we don't want our doctors to know one iteration. Like, my sister's a physician and she'll tell me this, we did this instead of this, and I did this with this patient. And I'm like, wow, like that's an incredible use. One drug, one very simple generic drug
Mhm.
gets used in 5 or 6 different ways. Do you not want your physician to know that? Of course we do,
Right.
right? We don't want our physician to walk in and they're just writing things down like they're a waiter. They need to know that, oh, if this is presenting, then this might be the case. Or if it's presenting in this way, it still might be that.
Yeah.
And we as CFPs have to take on the same responsibility to be able to be dynamic just the way that we want our physicians to be dynamic, the way that we want our lawyers to be dynamic, the way we want our accountants to be dynamic. All the professionals that we want to see, we want them to be dynamic. Why shouldn't we have that responsibility too?
You know what? That's the best way to say it, man.
Like, and that is what the exam. So, when you're doing this, it's important that you keep saying this out loud. And from an education standpoint, say it out loud and say it out loud and talk about it with somebody because you're never really going to get good at it until you're talking about it with somebody. Now, that could be your study buddy and highly recommended because figuring it out with a study buddy, you keep saying it over and over again and you're going at the same pace. You're at the same wavelength that somebody else is at. Chat about it with a tutor, chat about it with an instructor, but ultimately talk about it and talk about it until you put it through the sifter so many times that you're like, wow, I kind of get it because I stumbled and bumbled and fumbled. That is what learning is. It is the stumbling, it is the bumbling, it is the fumbling until you can get it down. And I think that's probably a good place for us to stop.
I think you gave some great pointers, man. I love it. I hope the listeners and the watchers enjoy this as well. But let's go.
With that being said, everybody, we hope you enjoyed this episode. Please make sure to like and subscribe to our channel, and we will see you on our next show. Take it easy, everybody.